And we are live.
All
Christopher
right.
Casey, how are you, sir?
I am
Welcome.
doing well.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Welcome, welcome. Is there any, before we start, is there anything you would like to say about yourself? Have you done a rando with Paul or one of the other corner citizens?
No, I haven't done any of that. I'm too impatient to mess with Paul's scheduling system. If I wanted to talk to him, I'd probably rather just go down to California and
Ha, that's a good idea.
Shanghai him after church. But
That's a good idea. What, just so the folks know who I'm talking to, they probably know you better by another name in the comments. Can you pronounce it for
I
me?
yeah, I'm signed up on YouTube and the Bridges of Meaning Discord as either Ixnon or Lochlann or some one slash the other. So
Gotcha. But we're going to call you Chris for now. You wanted to go by your Christian name, as they
yes,
say.
indeed.
Okay, and then the subject you wanted to talk about with me, you said, was hospitality in online spaces. It's a very appropriate subject, not just in relation to certain controversial events, interactions recently here in the corner, but I've been having lots of back and forth with lots of people in private conversations as well. It's a big subject, and I think it's one people are eager and ready to talk about. So let's first begin with, what does hospitality look like in real life, in your opinion?
Yes, that is a very good place to start. Yeah, hospitality in real life. Um, I don't know. My experience with that, we'll just say most recently, as the past 2 days, we hosted a Tolkien movie marathon. So
Okay.
we decided we were going to watch all the movies. So we invited people over to watch them with us, and you know, made food and hung out and watched Tolkien movies for several hours on end. Um,
Very good. We being.
it's we being me, my wife, and some of our friends.
Okay. And how did it go?
It went well. It's yeah. So I mean,
Well, did it provide? What I mean
not getting.
is when you went to some effort. Was it just to do it for fun, or was it to deepen some relationships, or further deepen already well established relationships, or make new friends? How? What?
We were doing this in the context here. We were doing it with people who were already friends, basically. So we said, we're doing this. Come on to our invited, people we knew to come on over and join us for it. So that it wasn't a set up as a like new person context, although that would not have been out of place really
Mm-hmm. And what made you
either.
choose Tolkien?
Basically, we're nerds, so and our people who are friends with us are also tend to be nerds, so it
Very good. Very
just fits
good.
in that whole space.
And just to give us all an idea, what what were the how what was the oldest friend? How, I mean, not in terms of how long are you knowing the person the most, and how, who would say be the newest of the friendship group for you guys? And were these your wife's friends, your friends? Were the mutual friends from college,
Yeah.
high school, kindergarten?
Well, the people who showed up, they were our mutual friends from that we've known um, collectively for about 10 years. Was the people who showed up basically as people we've known for several years.
Okay. And so if
It's
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. long pauses. I tend to over fill them too quickly. So just tell me if my pacing's too quick. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. I don't know. It's a lot of our mutual friends we found through a local LARP group. So that was the general pool of people we were drawing from for invites and whatnot. And we've known people there for at least 10 years minus all the way up to the present people. And that was the general length of time we've known people that we invited.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, roughly how old are you?
I am 40 years old.
Okay. Okay. Online a lot, or not?
Middling online a lot. I guess I tend to lurk spaces a lot online more than be participatory.
Okay. Well, I've seen you a lot in the
But changing
comments, so
that
that's you're
presently.
certainly active in comments. It seems like I mean I recognize you.
That's a more recent development than years prior.
And what brought you to the corner? How long have you been around here?
I've been around Paul Vanderklay or looking at his stuff for a year or so. I first saw him several years ago, and then wasn't really immediately interested in some guy talking about Jordan Peterson necessarily. But then after he would pop up occasionally, and I consumed more of his content, started paying more attention to him and everyone else adjacent. And so I would say that I am Peterson-sphere adjacent in the online space.
Okay. Interesting. So you weren't interested in Peterson. So
well, in Paul Vanderklay specifically, I looked at some of Peterson's stuff, and Paul just initially seemed just purely derivative of him, and so that wasn't immediately interesting.
I see. Gotcha.
And I think I got into him. Basically, I found someone else online had posted a Burn Powers thing. And then through that, and also Paul's appearance on Benjamin Boyce got me more interested in Paul. So I came kind of roundabout way into all that.
No, this is always fascinating to see how we wind up in this place. Everybody kind of has their own little track, and Paul's generated so much content. That volume of material has allowed for many little pathways in, it seems. So Burn Power. You guys go to church somewhere?
Yes, I go to church. I go to the North Anchorage Church of God up here.
Okay. North Anchorage. Does that mean you're in Alaska?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So it's already winter there practically. Or is it?
Practically. It's still fall. It'll be winter by the end of next month. So.
Okay. Wow. Okay, this is fascinating. Folks, we've never met before, so this is all new to both of us. How exciting. So, okay, with a little bit of setup, anything else about in real life hospitality we should flush out before we shift over to what online hospitality would look like?
Well, I think that the online hospitality should be drawn from the real life hospitality.
Okay.
You have an if you're going to host an online space, you should like have some take it from the physical space and like the rules you would use there. Like if you I think have an office that you stream from,
Right. Mm-hmm. Sure.
and that sets up a certain space rather than just me sitting in my living room. That's a slightly different space for setting up like perhaps a different type of conversation.
Mm-hmm. So,
If that needs to be fleshed out more, I don't know.
well, no. Is it that a recent conversation I had with Chad? He was concerned about too many rules being forced top down on interaction. Um, are you suggesting there be some introduced, or we just well? Let me put it this way: is hospitality in any space, online or real, is it best cultivated, or and like you might nurture a garden, or is it more something that's imposed? There's just it's like an etiquette, a standard, and everyone
I
is held to
think
it.
I think cultivated is the better way to think about it, although there is some imposition that results from that because it's there's certain things that I think of like hospitality as kind of like this big container sort of,
Mm-hmm.
to steal language from other people, but and it's I was drawing the contrast between like an office space or a like living room space because you can it's easier to impose rules in an office space when that's necessary.
Right.
So it's yeah.
Is
But
there
that would, like as I said, have to be a cultivation thing, not a purely imposed thing for whatever the goal is for the space you're trying to host.
It's interesting too is when you think about hospitality, there are rules for guests that are implied and rules for the host. The host is, we all have certain ideas of hosting duties. Some people are really good hosts. Some people are kind of mediocre. It's you said like for example, you mentioned you guys cooked for your guests and such. Some people are more like potato chips and a 2-liter bottle of soda, and the couch, right? That's the a meeting place. And so everyone has different expectations of hosting. Guests know, uh, I don't want to be too vulgar, but you could say that some are really all know what a really bad guest would look like, and we don't want to be that, and yet
Right.
uh, say kick off my shoes if it's a house that wears their shoes and put my feet up on the coffee table would be typically unsavory behavior, at least for an unfamiliar for a first time guest. Maybe if everybody's family and they're really used to each other and putting your feet up on the table is normal, that might be okay. But at that level, you're almost not a guest at that point. You're like family. If the to Well, we all know where the bathroom is. A good guest will use the bathroom and use it correctly, as opposed to
Yeah.
using the kitchen for bathroom privileges. That would be a bad
Hmm.
guest, to put it in the most extreme
Yes.
terms. So we have guest obligations and we have hosting obligations. All are somewhat flexible within reason. it's all very culture driven, isn't it? I mean, it seems like you,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hence the word
that's the thing.
cultivate.
It's
Yeah.
it's like hospitality is a set of rules that you've inherited from the culture that you live in.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
It's like a distributed cognition over time is how that
Yeah. Very good.
would be said.
Very good. Hmm. So let's do a little shimmy to the left or right on this and just ask let me ask um, what motivated you to approach me with this subject and want to talk about it?
Well, I kind of backed into thinking about it in hospitality because people were talking about empathy as the thing that we needed more of. And I think hospitality is a better frame for thinking about what's necessary
Mm-hmm. Very good.
because hospitality is a cultural thing that you need more than one person to be hospitable. And whereas you could be or try to be empathetic about a thing by yourself.
Ah, very good.
So,
Yes. Empathy is certainly something one can initiate individually. Of course, it's only perfected through social interaction. And by perfected, I mean refined or improved.
mm,
Um, but hospitality, that's very good though. In this space, in the corner or the Peterson-sphere, it's uh, definitely much more a group thing. Um, so let's. How can online? Trying to figure out the best order, but I'm gonna fling this at you, and it may not make any. I mean, the picture will hopefully come into focus over time. But it's so how can hospitality improve empathy or empathy improve hospitality in this online space with this online community that's also leaked into the real world with our conferences and estuary meetings and so on.
right. I think that definitely the empathy can inform hospitality. That's like an aspect of just personal interaction. Um, I think also that hospitality is a thing that would encompass what Paul Vanderklay has talked about a bit with being sincerity, authenticity, and profilicity.
Mm-hmm.
I think those might all be like different forms of hospitality when done correctly.
Continue. Can you kind of fill that out a little bit more?
uh, I'll try here anyway. Yeah, well,
Let's just go
it's
back to
like
Paul's little triplet.
right. You have I don't know. Sometimes people talk about sincerity, authenticity, and profilicity as like things that moved through culture separately as like a progression from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's sort of happened in general, but the best way to think about it would be that each one has a certain place in a certain space.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's you could set up a space. You don't necessarily need to set up a space that you want to be like just purely authentic online here without any concern for profilicity or sincerity, however you want to define those kind of.
Well, you
But you
sir,
don't want to like,
go ahead
oh,
and
go
finish your
ahead.
thought. Well, no, I was just going to say that um, in the real world, um, I don't know if we've all had these experiences, but I've occasionally found myself in a setting where, say, it's a couple that's hosting some shindig, and the husband, often the husband, but it could be the wife, uh, is not is less one of the spouses is less enthusiastic about hosting this gathering, and it's and uh, the authenticity and sincerity are kind of lacking. It's very the hosting duties are performative, and and you can and it's visibly performative. It's not. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't think everybody wants to have me here, so and it's very uncomfortable, and you're looking for the door and a polite exit ASAP, and uh, so I can see what you're saying. It all works together. The the profilicity now, the profilicity, it's like your online profile, right? Am I understanding the word right? Is that what we mean? Or the profilicity is the profile that
Yeah.
we're,
Well,
or go ahead. Yeah, maybe I don't understand the word.
yeah, I think pro-felicity is used as like putting on a presence, or sort of there's like a performative aspect to it that is, I want to be perceived this way in this community.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm a good Democrat. I'm a good Republican. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Muslim, a good Jew. I'm going to do certain things and wear certain clothes, perform certain actions, attend certain services, attend certain activities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to fill out that um, presence. Is
Yeah.
that what we're
Like
talking
I want
about?
to host a yeah, I want to like host an online conversation, and this is what other people have done or what I think that should be, and so I'm going to put that forward
Hmm.
as I want to be like this, you know.
Right, right. Very good. And we want sincerity and authenticity to tie into that insofar as they don't undermine it, right? I really like how you put that together as having them work together. I don't know if I've ever quite understood Paul to say it that way, but I like it. If you learned it from Paul or discerned it on your own, I love it. Um, how they all seem to have to work together. Um,
Yeah, like you were saying, like the host that isn't really excited about hosting this event in real life is being more profelicitous than sincere necessarily.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, the opposite of that going badly would be the I don't know, online YouTube video I saw, the Minnesota goodbye. If you're have some
I
concept of that,
Yeah, I'm trying to
it
remember
was the
the
thing where
Minnesota.
it's
Sounds
you
familiar.
host the people over. You host the people over for dinner, and then you just say, "Oh no, don't, just stay longer, stay longer. We don't need you to leave," And the couple ends up staying the night and
Oh,
having breakfast. And the host couple is like waving goodbye and chasing out the car, waving goodbye when they leave. That would be the
yes.
like the antithesis of an unwelcoming host would be the overly welcoming profelicity.
Yes, definitely. Um, so, with all that in mind, how well are we doing at cultivating hospitality in this little corner or the Peterson-sphere? I don't think of myself as being part of the Peterson-sphere. Um, a lot of the people that do think of themselves as being the Peterson-sphere, I'm kind of not deeply connected to. And so I'm in Paul Vanderklay's orbit, so that's kind of my scene. Um, uh, So I'm not. So it could look differently, and it would look differently in different channels. I mean, so you've seen. Okay, let's look. Let's really narrow it down and put myself under scrutiny instead of judging others. I've produced a lot of content already in the few months I've been active. How well am I doing at hospitality? And you can be candid.
I think you're doing well. I mean, you're pretty good at like just hosting the stream you want to host and doing that. I mean, you don't seem to be doing terribly or much like obviously wrong.
Nothing
So
glaring. Without naming
I think
names,
you do
what was a
well at it.
bad? What would it look? What would it look like doing incorrectly? Or doing when would it? What does an inhospitable channel look like? Or is it
Oh, let's see.
event by event?
It more goes event by event for when things become inhospitable. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to like. If I could
Yeah.
think of one, I don't think I would want to like say that this person is a bad host.
No,
Just
I don't want you to
blanket
do that
statement
either.
across the board. So
No,
I would
no.
say like focusing more on good examples. I like the way that Father Eric runs his live chats.
Okay.
As I was thinking about it, so he's good at like setting up a space for a specific intention and following through and enforcing that without having it go off the rails. And if it starts going off the rails, he's good at like shutting it down and refocusing everybody. So
So what is that? How does he? What does he do? So he creates a topic for discussion.
he he does a live stream Sunday afternoons here where he starts off and does a short little monologue and then invites people to come in and talk about that or whatever else. And he's got it regimented. He does it for like consistently about 2 hours, and then he shuts it down because it's time for him to go to bed.
Okay.
And yeah, there's been times where people like start arguing and going back and forth, and he'll just take the streamer and just like shut everybody down and say, okay, let's calm down here for a moment, and then he'll bring people back up and they can continue.
So he kind of functions as a referee.
Yeah, he's very good at doing that.
Okay. Interesting. I'll have to look
Or
at
better
those
than
more closely.
average from what I've seen anyway.
Okay. Because things can get, and you've seen it in other situations where it's not quite so, things are allowed to get too hot between parties.
Yeah, that definitely can happen. Unpredictably sometimes.
Right. On the other hand, what to play devil's advocate? What some? Well, let me just without doing that. How, as we all know, a little friction is good, right? I mean, a little heat keeps it interesting and inspires the creative juices in our mind to say things and have insights sometimes that we might not have if things are kept at a very calm level. So I'm wondering, um, how much is too much? When's it too spicy? What does too spicy look like, if we'll put it that way? And then, or too hot? What is that? Too uncomfortable, whatever it is. Um, and then also too, you've got parties. You have this is you have a third component in an online space that you don't have at a real in a typical real world setting where hospitality is being practiced. You have the host and the guests in the real world. Here we have an audience, and everybody's doing. You have the audience, then the immediate, right, the chat, and then you have a long term audience, later viewers who go back and watch it. Um, that's a level of complexity there. Is the audience a group of people who need to be considered um, when we're hosting an online event?
Yes, I think the audience makes it necessary to have more imposed rules than you would like maybe want to have, because you're considering like the other people and how this is going to be viewed, other people viewing it and how it's going to be viewed later, like requires maybe a bit more decorum than you would usually have with, you know, even your best friend like talking casually. The fact that you have an audience means you can't just consider you and the other person.
Right. So I'm wondering, let's approach it like this. When does this online event begin to look or feel inhospitable?
I mean, I wanted to say that one of the things that you want to avoid for the most part is like visible displays of emotion. I mean, that's usually anger when it gets bad
Mm-hmm.
online here.
Okay.
When
Yeah.
it gets to be, you know, when two people are visibly like yelling and angry at each other, that definitely makes the space less hospitable. But it
Right.
doesn't. I don't know that's limited to anger. Just if you're excessively displaying something else, any emotion online is probably that can be too taken too far in any direction, I think.
Sure. We're better at. It seems maybe it's just because we're more practiced. We're better at controlling our anger. I think in physical spaces, because we have the full range of visual cues to respond to. Um, when we're confronting another, we can if now. I mean, obviously, some people have limitations for developmental reasons. They have limitations on their ability to pick up on all those cues. We all have different brains and nervous systems and um, parenting and so on. So it's but as a rule, it's probably safe to say most of us know how to behave in physical spaces. And as Paul has mentioned several times to me, anyway, that it seems like we're all still learning how to operate similarly in this space. Any disagreement or thoughts that what you'd add to that?
No, I agree with that. I think it comes from the like online spaces tend to have this like culture of anonymity, which leads to like more bad behavior being more acceptable or tolerated online than you would get in physical or in real space, real life. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, that's extremely like Jordan Peterson on Twitter kind of went off the
Uh,
rails on that.
that's a funny example. Yeah. Yeah. Or Twitter just as a category of human conduct. Um, it seems custom made for going off the rails, doesn't it?
Yes, I theorize that a Twitter derangement syndrome affects like most of the people using it. So
Yeah. So easy. And for a while it was Facebook. But Facebook is, for me anyway, and for a lot of people, is just fallen off our radars. Even if we have accounts, we don't visit them like we used to. And we used to get all worked up on even Facebook, where you had more words to spend, and sometimes it didn't make any difference. You got just as upset on Facebook as you did on on Twitter where you only had 100 at the time, 140 characters, whatever it was.
Right.
So as a so we're feeling this out. It's we're going to we're leaning towards cultivation as opposed to top down order. But on the other hand, you mentioned the presence of a strong moderator, say a strong focused moderator, like you suggested Father Eric is on his channel and his live streams. Someone who can and is willing to clear the screen, tell everybody to take a deep breath, and then I suppose a person at a time kind of bring it back together again. That's very different than you don't typically say a very excited Monopoly game. I don't know what, or a poker game or something. Things could get pretty. I guess I get a good poker game, maybe involving a few dollars, can get a little bit contentious. Typically, you don't clear the room. So that's pretty heavy-handed in some ways when you think about it. And that compare and contrast, say, in real life poker game and a online stream, where you can go in and just clear the room. But you'd think that that's definitely the better way of managing a stream, because it's all words. You're trading words as opposed to poker chips and light conversation.
Right. I'm not sure an online conversation and a real life poker game are exactly analogous to each other, but
yeah, what would be analogous? What's a better analogy?
Well, I mean, the simplest way to do it is just say we're having an online conversation versus an in-person conversation. I think all the listening and participatory skills you would have in that translate somewhat.
Right.
There's, with an online poker game, there's a huge monetary incentive to not kick everybody out all the time.
Right.
But there's plenty of in-person spaces where people agree to a set of rules if they think something is going to become contentious.
Right. I've never been, so we switch it, say, to a Bible study where there's lots of, I grew up during the days of the home Bible study. I don't know if they're quite what as common as they used to be. But I think there's still some form of these home fellowship groups that big and small churches have. I've rarely seen one go so far south that the host has to clear the room. What's the difference? Is it just what we just have not? Because I can see. Well, Paul's done it. He recently cleared the screen. He wanted to talk just to me. Now, he wasn't trying to clear the screen to control it, but there was a subject, and it was funny. It was one of his recent live streams, cleared the stream, and he just said, "I'm going to talk to just the Mark for a minute. I'll bring you all back in a minute, but I'm going to talk to Mark." And so we talked for a minute. I don't remember exactly what it was about, but it was somewhat controversial, I guess. And we talked, and he talked to me more than vice versa, and then brought everybody back. That's just not done. That's not typically done in real life. The way we pull people aside, and then of course it's done in public too. There's an audience. There's always that audience. That makes it always so strange. But yet it's an essential component.
Yeah, and of course, online you don't have the StreamYard tools to mute people as easily. So.
That sounds almost like a Saturday Night Live skit. um, with in real life powers to mute guests. That's pretty
Yeah,
funny.
that was a thing James Lindsay mentioned was he spends a lot of time on Twitter, and he was had the experience in real life that he was talking to somebody who says like, "Oh man, I just want to mute this person right now," and so that would be an example of, I think, the wrong way to go about. That's why I think you should have that's online moving towards in person, which is the wrong way to go about things, rather than in person influencing the way you do things online.
Right. But one thing interesting, I don't know if we're going to come to any resolution that'll be satisfying to our audience, but that's okay. This is an ongoing dialogue, and it's a great for me. It's helpful to uh, keep working on this subject, and because
Well,
it's a
we're
topic.
talking yeah, we're talking about cultivating a space or different types of spaces. So in some sense, we can't solve this, at least not for
Right,
everybody.
right. I'm just thinking,
But it
like,
may
for
be helpful for
example,
thinking through it.
well, I was just it just as you were talking about about Lindsay wanting to mute a person in real life like he does on Twitter. I just had this happen this morning in the Sunday school class at my church, the adult Bible study that I attend, and the Sunday school leader uh, mischaracterized a partisan political event um, in the opinion of one of a lady in the group. She was deeply offended about the way he spoke about this event, and uh, he wasn't he was very much in his bubble, thinking more or less, kind of just talking aloud, thinking aloud, with expressing what he perceived as an obvious fact that he had no idea was in contention, that could possibly be in contention, and that there might be an alternative view or alternative interpretation of the event. And she rose up and set the man straight. And it was a little startling, and of course it's uncomfortable for everybody when that happens. But by the time we were done, he took it. He took the correction. If he did not the correction is not the correction of facts, but the correction in terms of under being in a sense being a good host. Or he like, I should have been more understanding. He's like, I really apologize if I caused any offense, and I have to be somewhat vague on the details because these are people I go to church with. But I hope there's enough there you can understand, maybe get a grasp of what I'm talking about, or how people can. And it seems like what we're having is a bit of leakage from the online social space, where there is a lack of decorum, hospitality, empathy, and it's leaking into the real life, the real world. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that does happen. I mean, I've noticed some of that or at least I think I've noticed some of that with as I blame a lot of that because it's my experience mostly on video games culture online, because that's more and more common. It's a thing where the online space gets more heated because you don't have all the in-person signaling, or and then there's, well, I don't want to get too far into gamer culture necessarily. Let's, yeah, just leave it at there's a lot of in person signaling in person that allows like a heated situation to de-escalate normally than there is online.
For someone like me, it's even harder to comprehend that there is such a thing as gamer culture because it's not something I've
Well,
ever been a part of. So the idea that such a thing even exists is not news, but it's kind of like, huh, I wonder what that looks
I
like.
mean, it's I think it's mostly not good, but
Okay. Hmm. One last question, or as we're kind of coming in for a landing, maybe not quite the last, but second to last or something like that. Um, some of the discussions I've had lately have been around uh, men and women and how men conduct themselves. Do you see an obligation for not trying to? I think my positions have been fairly well stated, and I don't know if you've seen them all, but it's. I have a sense of. Well, let me just ask it. Do you is it all equal, or do you think that um, men and women have an obligation to, certainly at least men have an obligation to behave differently towards women than they might with men?
one moment.
No worries.
Okay, yeah, I mean, equality is the wrong way to try to view things. I mean, I'm not an egalitarian in any regard, really, but so yeah, there's as far as I've listened to your views on like men and women relating online, I think your instincts are all correct, or at least mostly correct. Um, whether that plays out exactly the way you think it should in any specific situation might be off, but
Right. Right.
and yeah, that's another online thing that's happened is you're on the internet no one knows if you're a bot or a dog or whatever, and so you get this illusion of that the everyone you're interacting with is an equal interchangeable unit, which is completely delusional if you're interacting with anybody in real life ever. So
That's interesting. What is that's really interesting. The idea that we might do that, is that something you think we do? Uh, do all of us do something like that from time to time,
I don't
or is it a more dysfunctional sort of
I don't know.
person?
I think that's an inherent temptation or like flaw or tendency you could develop when interacting, just like especially just like over text or something. Like
Right.
I'm just interacting via text with this other text thing,
Right.
and well, that's why I mean it's a good rule. One of the good rules I think that's proliferated in the Peterson-sphere and other adjacent spaces is that to when we're having a live conversation, you show up like with your camera on as a person, and that helps
Right.
mitigate
Right.
some of the
Right.
like lower instincts that can arise.
To do maybe one thing to do in this cultivation process is to humanize, individualize, in a good way, respect the individuality of the person you're interacting with. I mean, I don't know if there's any procedures one could develop, practices.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of like some set of universal procedures that should be developed or whatever. I think what you do is you set up, I'm going to have a space to do this, and then you like implement any rules based off that. You,
Mm-hmm.
Like if we're doing a garden here, it's like I'm going to grow, a potato, and so I'm going to set up this space for growing potatoes, and I'm going to, kick out any weeds, or like, if we're someone else tries to like bring in an onion or something, it's like, no, we're not growing that here right now. We can do that later, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Well, it seems like you could, like you suggested off camera before we, or off camera, off audio, off recording before we started, that we pray, and that's like a mindfulness moment. Only very, as two Christians, it's Christ focused, and
Right.
it's a good, we as people, we're not quite, we're coming from two different parts of the country. Certainly we are coming from a different set of experiences, but that we have that little bond that we could, in Christ, that we could center around and focus our minds just briefly, that further humanized us in a way. Maybe it could. uh, I'm just
Right. It,
wondering.
it means that it means we have, more in common. Us, meeting here for the first time, we have similar enough backgrounds that we can, progress
Hmm. Hmm.
further than just, two random people.
Right, right. And as you work out into this, whether it's the corner or the Peterson-sphere, it gets a little more diverse, a little more, our bonds, a little, the threads tying us together a little thinner. Um, but uh, it is there something similar, or because we, as you know, I mean, we have some atheists in the corner. We have, Paul talked about at the Chino event, somebody wanted to set up communion, and he's like scratching his head trying to figure out how you're going to pull that off. You know,
I
sure, the
mean, yeah,
Protestants
communion
can.
would be a weird thing to try to have everybody everywhere
You can't do
participate
it,
in.
right? Because
Yeah.
of just a fundamental theological concepts underpinning the whole sacrament or ordinance, depending on how you don't even see. We don't even share the same language for it, right, across Christendom. Um, so yeah, that's a level of say, humanizing uh, activity that we can't share. But what could we share? I mean, can if we can't share a prayer, can we share a meditation? And if we share a meditation, is that too much for? I would think that could easily be too much, too far of a accommodation for more orthodox people, right? Be they Christian or Jewish, or I mean, it's all very, very tricky. Maybe are you acquainted with Sherry at Grail Country?
I've seen her
A,
various
sh-
times.
a Sherry reading of a poem. I mean, it's just perhaps a reading of a poem could get us there. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what might be a good practice, and it because maybe in the future I might try this out and just see if I could come up with something and see how that moves us along in the direction what we're talking about. Um, Most people
Yeah,
can
I
listen to a
know.
poem.
Yeah, what you need, I think, is someone where you set a frame that we're all going to submit to in this, temporarily at least.
Right. So just a little framework, like Chad's 12 traditions. It might be a little more elaborate than is needed, but the 12 traditions from AA, really good. It's worth looking up. It's the
Right.
long
Yeah, I
form.
imagine.
Yeah,
I
very much.
haven't looked that up, but I would probably be worth doing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I read it at the end of my on ramp radio discussion with him, and at his urging, and they were excellent, and they're definitely worth. And it doesn't take long. It's probably a 15-minute read at the most. certainly when you're reading to yourself, probably faster. And so it's worth it, worth looking up. So we're at the end. I hope this was somewhat satisfying. And that is there anything else you would add or fill out?
Um, no, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I don't have anything pressing that I would need to add. I mean, I know that Manuel Post, if you look his stuff up, if you look him up, I know he's done a lot of work with setting frames and practices. So look up maybe his channel is Agapic Orientation, where he has a bunch of Paul style randos conversations. He's very interesting to watch with that.
So let's see. At Agapic.
Yeah, Agapic Orientation.
Got it. I just subscribed. I will look. All right. Well, thank you, Christopher. I really appreciate the hour you spent with me. I appreciate you reaching out and taking up taking me up on my invitation for doing an audio only discussion. So sounds like your family is at home and ready to play. So I will leave you
Yep,
to
yep.
it.
Right on. Yep. Thank you for inviting me on.
And would you like me to send you a link to hear this before I post it, or would you like me to just go ahead and upload it as soon as it's ready?
You can just go ahead and upload it. I think I'm not interested in listening to myself talk on a video, really. So
It's not as painful as you'd think, although it can be quite painful when you have to for editing. But yeah, it's. I don't think there's anything here that's controversial, and certainly you acquitted yourself well. So thank you, sir. You have a very good day, and my blessings to your wife and family.
yes, the same to you.
All righty.